Welcome back, this is Off by One. A couple of days ago I put up a demo for a cheap yet high yield autofarm in Create 0.5. I've had loads of questions about the design and just generally how it works under the hood, so I'm hoping to clear some of that up in this video. Despite the complexity of the motion, the underlying redstone is actually really simple, so this won't be a full-on tutorial like my cheap survival-friendly elevator. Okay, so how simple are we talking? In its most basic form, this simple. The nicest thing about this design is that you only need to read the state of two blocks. What do I mean by that? Well, these sequence gear shifts, as they're running, produce a 1 signal, literally a strength 1 redstone output. And when they aren't moving, they produce no signal at all, which as you can see, these currently aren't producing any signal. Therefore, we can essentially say that as a signal moves from 1 to 0, it serves as an indication of an arm reaching a stopped state. It's not quite as simple as just inverting the signal output though, as we need to ensure that the other gear shift isn't perpetually powered, as that means it will in turn never reach its stop state. So for example, if I was just to run a torch straight into this gear shift, you will see that it never actually reaches its stop state here, despite the gear shift still being powered and the rotation being stopped. That's easy enough to solve with a pulse shortener, which is what we're using this pulse repeater for here. And the only reason I'm placing a block here instead of just running it straight into the redstone is to essentially make this even cheaper than it already is. If you have a cheaper way to build a falling edge detector, which is essentially what I'm using this as here, you could swap out everything other than the comparator. On the other side, we build exactly the same thing. So we've got a comparator running into a block with a torch, running into our pulse repeater, running into our sequence gear shift. That essentially turns this circuit into a clock. And just like any other redstone clock, if you power one of the torches within it, you can stop it. And similarly, when you unpower it, you can start up the motion again. So as this clock cycles between on one side, off on the other, to on this side, off on the other, it passes the arm back and forth. To stop the mechanism, you simply turn off the torches by flicking this lever. Now you might be thinking, okay, great, that's 2 arms. How do I do the other 3? Doesn't this get expensive? Well, you don't actually need any more trigger circuits. You can actually reuse the same signal from whichever arm becomes your outer arm. So in this design here, it looks a little bit more complicated initially, but it is exactly the same redstone as here, just the layout's changed. So in the same way, we have redstone comparator into block with torch, into pulse repeater, into sequence gear shift. And then we have redstone comparator into block with torch, into pulse repeater, into sequence gear shift. But we also have an additional line of redstone running back round to activate our other sequence gear shift. So this one essentially allows us to pass it from here to here to here to here, and I'll show you that by flicking the lever. Just like that. Now this design of course scales up, so if you want to add another 2 rotational points, like in the clover design that I showed off over there, then that's exactly what you do. Just to show you sort of underneath the redstone here, I have my comparator running into this block, much the same, running into a torch, which then runs into a block, and then into my pulse repeater, which powers this redstone line, which leads to one side, this redstone line, which leads to another side, this redstone line, which leads to the other block that we get the signal from, and finally this redstone line that leads to our final gear shift. The only difference in the clover design is that the sequence gear shift here is set to 90 degrees rather than 180, as is on the 3 rotational point model. This would be a 5 rotational point model. And the 2 rotational point model, both of them are 360. The only other thing that I think I need to mention with this design is that in order for the mechanical harvesters to work, the way that the blocks move has to remain consistent. That means that on your center block, you need to return one way, and on your outer arms, you need to rotate the other. Rotate, not return. So as you can see, the blocks are essentially always moving forward, even if the direction of rotation sometimes changes. And this just ensures that your mechanical harvesters continue to spin, because if you ever run one of these in reverse, you'll see that they don't work, which makes sense because you would be essentially blasting your blocks with other blocks, not actually running them through the mechanical harvester. Now, one of the other topics that came up was, okay, great, how do you actually collect anything from this? Because you don't have a connection arm like you see on some traditional designs. Well, it's quite simple actually, and in fact probably more simple than the ones that have connection arms. You just place a chute beneath the stock block positions. So in this arm I've got barrels set up, and in one location I have 2 smart chutes. If you were doing this really efficiently, you might have one area dedicated to wheat, one area dedicated to potatoes, one to cabbage, one to flax. You might even have rice, depending on if you're using Farmer's Delight like I am. And you could set up smart chutes beneath certain points to look for certain resources that it could filter down. And yeah, that's pretty much everything. I hope this video was useful. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you again next time.